Hi, I'm Em, and this is Fang Farrier. Today we'll be touching on self-care, and in particular, hydration. Water, water everywhere, and not a drop to drink. That's from the Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And it refers to being at sea and being surrounded by salt water. But it often springs to mind on my drive home after a busy day at work. When I'm in the car, wishing I'd had a water bottle there because I'm feeling thirsty, and thinking back over the day and wondering if I drank anything at all. Because quite often I don't even remember having to go to the toilet. And it's probably because, hand on heart, probably every day in the last 20 years that I finish work, I'll have finished it dehydrated. And when I say that, I can kind of hear, so what? And I kind of hear that line from The Hangover Part 2, where Mr. Chow says, "But did you die?" And no, I'm not likely to either. And I'm not alone. 75% of us are probably chronically dehydrated. There was a study in New York done in '98 of about 3,000 people, and that's the conclusion they came to, is that most of us aren't drinking enough. And if we are drinking enough, it's being offset by things like caffeine and alcohol and salt in our diets, that it's leaving us at a water loss. Because we're about 60% water. So it's not surprising that losing water or being dehydrated will have effects on our body. But when we start to look at the brain, it becomes even more significant, because water makes up 75% of our brain mass. So it's not surprising that those signs and symptoms might be the things that affect us first, the mental and cognitive effects. And maybe we're not paying enough attention to them. The world of sport and exercise nutrition, however, have been paying close attention to dehydration for some time. And they see that in terms of performance in their athletes. So if we go back to our being made of 60% water, and say we have a 100 kg person, what you start to see is after a 300 milliliter loss of water, so that's less than a Coke can, you're getting an increased strain on the heart. And then as you lose water further, you're decreasing muscular endurance, decreasing aerobic endurance, decreasing motor skills and strength. And you might say, well, so what? We're not athletes. But I would challenge you and say we are, and that dentistry is an endurance sport. Bear with me. But we spend our entire day holding postures for long periods of time, working with outstretched arms at shoulder height, twisting and contorting ourselves into positions to best accommodate patients more often than not. And we do this for hours on end, patient after patient, day after day, year after year, for a 40-year career. And when we start off, I'd like to think most of us are quite fit and healthy and without injury. So we're working off a really great baseline, and the body's quite forgiving. So we've probably got good core strength. We're learning as we go, as we increase the amount of dentistry we're doing, we're strengthening up and adapting. But what happens when things come along that change us physically? Things like pregnancy, things like injury or illness. I had never thought of dentistry as being a particularly physical job. If someone asked me what a physical job is, I would be thinking about someone that's cutting down trees or lifting things or shifting things, or doing something I really see as putting the heart rate up and bringing on a real sweat. But I suppose ours is almost the equivalent of long-term yoga. It's core strength, it's flexibility, and it's being able to hold postures for a long period of time. But the problem is the postures we're trying to hold to do dentistry is we're freezing up our thoracic spine, we're locking it up and bracing it, and that's meant to be flexible. So that flexibility we have to find from our necks and our lower backs. And after 5, 15, 20 years, we start to see the problems with that. If you look at colleagues who are close to retirement, and not just dentists, this is dental assistants and therapists, hygienists, is you'll see them stooped over, particularly towards the end of the day, shoulders rounded in, forward posture, head forward, head down, and walking like they're protecting pain. Because it is a tough job physically. And what we need to take from the world of athletes is that recognition that we need to both prepare preventatively and look at recovering, that we need to recover. Because what do athletes do? They have big performance events, and then they have to recover to look at repeating the same or doing better the week after, the day after, the month after. And that's what we do every day, is we're doing something that's quite hard on the body, it's tough on the mind, and we're expecting to be able to repeat it the following day. So whilst there's loads of things that kind of come into that, and we'll cover a lot of that on the podcasts to come, hydration is a really simple starting point. We know we need water. We know we'll die without it. We know we need it more than food in some instances, or more urgently than food. But there was another study that was done in China, and they were looking at the effects of dehydration mentally and on kind of cognitive function. And what they discovered was that what they saw in dehydrated individuals was an increase in brain fog, afternoon fatigue, focus issues, depression, anger, exhaustion, headaches, sleep issues, lack of mental clarity and acuity, and a decrease in attention and reaction. Well, that sounds like my working day after about midday. And when I was in the depths of burnout, that was a good day I've just described. And that's kind of my point, is that hydrating yourself fully can help avoid some of those things or improve some of those things. A lot of the stuff we see with stress and burnout is we're seeing brain fog and focus issues and exhaustion and headache and sleep issues, and we don't need to be contributing to them by being dehydrated as well. So in the recent World Health Organization definition of burnout, they're kind of number one out there, 3 kind of criteria really for burnout were feelings of energy depletion and exhaustion. And I can say from experience that that's 100% true. Just feeling like you are beyond exhausted. You don't want to do anything outside of work. You don't want to do anything at the weekend, because all you can think of is, how am I going to face the following day? How am I going to face Monday? I need to recharge. Although not necessarily being in the right mindset to do things that are recharges and help you recover. But again, I'll come back to burnout another time. So water's a really easy fix. If we can be hydrated, we can be at optimal performance physically and mentally. Now, who wouldn't want a bit of that? And how easy is it? How easy is it to drink water? You would think easy, but if it's not a habit of yours, it's going to take some work and it's going to take some effort. You won't just suddenly go from drinking nothing but a couple of cups of coffee to drinking enough water every day. And how much water is enough water? Well, it depends. Like any good answer, it depends. So there are calculations that will give you an idea relative to your body weight. And I think it's something along the lines of 30 to 40 millilitres per kilo. But generally, on average, people talk about 3 litres of water a day. That might sound like more than you've heard before, but a litre of that is meant to be with food or part of food. Now, you can find some foods will dehydrate you. And as I mentioned earlier, kind of high salt diets what happens with things like high salt diets, high sugar to some degree, but also dehydrated foods. Now, most of us don't eat dehydrated foods, and you might even remember your parents or be a parent and be telling your kids not to eat dehydrated instant noodles, amongst other things. Also on my list would be those energy gels for racing. Again, another sport nutrition topic for another time. But what happens is those things, they get into the gut, and to digest them or to dilute them or get rid of them, the body needs to draw water from the body into the gut to deal with them. So you're, in essence, dehydrating yourself, because to process them, you're having to use your own body water. But you should have, generally speaking, a litre of water that just comes from eating. The other 2 litres, that's drinking water itself. And not to demonise caffeinated drinks or fizzy drinks or juice or whatever way you have fluids, they all contribute to water content. But as we are aware that the caffeine is a natural diuretic, so it's going to help you excrete water rather than actually keep it. And, first choice, best choice is good old water. So I'm going to talk about water in itself, but if you are looking at how much fluid you're taking in a day, do include other fluids, and I'll talk about kind of how to fine-tune that kind of later on. But if we were talking about, say, a cup of water, so a cup of water is 250 mils, for argument's sake. How do we get through 2 litres in a day if it's not something you've been used to doing and you're not sure how to do it or how to arrange it around a day in the surgery? Well, I find the easiest thing is to bookend my day with a cup of water. So first thing you do when you wake up, 250 mils of water. Last thing you do before you go to bed, same. And that's it. That's a quarter of your day done in terms of water consumption. Then look at doing the same with your breakfast and the same with your evening meal. And you've done a litre outside of work. Now, how about bookending the surgical day in the same way? That you start your day before you take in your first patient, and you finish your day before you leave the practice with a cup of water. That only leaves 2 cups of water you've got to get through a day to hit your magic 2 litres. If you have one of those at lunch, and then the other is what you need to kind of sip on during the day or kind of make an effort to get out of the surgery and do. I think it's just as important being about the water as it is about being a break from that room. I think of my busy day, and I leave the surgery to bring a patient in. I leave the surgery to hand a patient over to reception, maybe grab the odd thing off the printer. But that's pretty much it. The rest of the time is writing notes or being kind of buried away in the room. And I think it's just as good for us mentally, probably just as good as the hydration, is physically having a break from the room. I appreciate that at the moment under kind of COVID things, there are various places in the world that are doing an awful lot of PPE because they've got a lot of COVID in the community. I suppose on a positive note, here in New Zealand, we don't have any cases in the community and haven't consistently for a while. And we're back to pre-COVID PPE. So hopefully a light at the end of the tunnel for the rest of you, that you won't be in spacesuits forever, that the world will stop being quite so crazy, and will recognise that actually what we were doing before was working just fine. So all I have to do is kind of take my gloves and mask off, and I can leave the room. But I appreciate that there's those it's a bit more difficult for. But the other thing I think is, if we're not leaving the room and making those trips for a glass of water, if you're hydrating enough, you'll need to leave to go to the toilet. Is that we've got another team member that we're looking after. I think that what gets downplayed is our leadership role in just that team of 2. People talk about leadership in terms of practice leadership and within the profession. But at the end of the day, your team of 2, you and your DA, you're the leader. And if you're not taking breaks, they're not getting breaks. So it's another area we need to step up in. So that's how to do your 2 litres of water. It's that simple. And I know that I've kind of gone from the exciting topic of reading to the super exciting topic of water, but it's these easy things to do that are the best for kind of starting habits with. Things that aren't too unachievable. And if you're not sure even what you are drinking a day, is just start there. Make a list. Keep a record on your phone or on a piece of paper, and see what you are drinking. If you're not drinking hardly anything and you find suddenly the thought of just kind of diving into loads of water is a bit much, it's just start with that glass when you wake up. Have a glass of water ready by the bed to drink when you wake up, and start there, because that's 250 mils more than you were getting the day before, and it's a step in the right direction. If you think, well, I'm never going to find time at work, I just get too busy and too swamped. Assuming you've got an electronic diary, is just pop yourself in a 5-minute appointment. Double book it over the first patient of the day to remind yourself that before you start, that's your first thing. You can do the same with your day sheet. Just write it on the day sheet so that it's a visual cue that both you and your nurse can see. So you do get that kind of breakout. It's another great kind of tactic actually for if you are having problems with a patient, be that problems communicating or frustrations with them or something in a procedure that's not going quite right and you're getting a bit stuck, is just stop, breathe, leave the room, go have a glass of water. Come back and you'll find that a lot of that stress is dissipated in your absence. So there's all sorts of ways to accumulate this into the day. But as I say, hydration is important. They know about it in professional sport. They're using it all the time. I mean, here in kind of Super Rugby and things, that people are weighing themselves pre and post training because they want to see how much water they've lost, because it represents itself in weight. We need to not necessarily be taking that level of commitment to it, but we need to be aware of it. And we need to be aware that when we're feeling that brain fog, that afternoon fatigue, those focus issues, which I think now, as we're heading into the very end of 2020, people are exhausted from coping and managing with what's gone on and are just ready for a break. And part of that is the tiredness. And if water can help alleviate that, a simple glass of water, then why not? It's a quick, easy, cheap fix. We need to look after ourselves. We're not the greatest at it. We haven't really been taught to do it. And it's just, even if I can feel just a little bit less exhausted, I'll take it. So thanks for listening. If you want to join the conversation, come find me at Fang_Farrier on Twitter. Otherwise, look out for yourself and others. Remember, you're that team of two, and the other person needs looking after too. Take care of yourself. Catch you next time.